Hi everyone, this is James from Titan Drones. Today we're going to be modifying a Spark remote controller. This will allow it to be used with our various antennas such as the Control or Cyclone or Atlas. As always, when you're modifying a controller, we recommend you employ anti-static measures. This is an anti-static mat, and here's your wristband. Alright, for this modification you're going to need your install kit here. It has QMA adapters and then your QMA to IPEX connections. You're going to need some various nylon tools here. You're going to need a T6 Torx screwdriver. You're going to need a #1 Phillips. You could possibly need some long tweezers and some needle nose pliers. Alright, first step is to take your T6 Torx and you're going to unscrew these two screws here. There's one on this side and one on this side. It's always nice to have a little bin to put everything in so you don't lose it. Pry off these caps. Now we're going to take off this bottom plate. You're going to grab your blue nylon removal tool and you're going to hook it just like that, and you're going to push down. You see how that starts to pop up? You're going to do the same thing on the other side. Just like that. Now you're going to get up underneath the sides here towards the front of the RC. You're trying to separate it enough to get a tool right in this parting line here. As with the Mavic controller, those are some pretty beefy snaps, so don't be too alarmed. And once you work your way around, it's easy to snap off. Then you're going to set that aside. Once you're inside, you'll notice the Phillips head there and a Phillips head there. You're going to want to remove those two screws. Alright, now on the Spark, there are two ribbon cables, one there and one there. We're going to want to lift and release the locking mechanism. You're just going to pry it up, just like that, to where it's facing up. Do the same thing on the other side. And the reason for this is when we separate the remote controller and take off the top half, we don't want this connected and pulling out. Then you just pull the ribbon cable out. Just like that. Separate the remote controller on the parting line. And set that aside. Alright, to start this, we are going to remove this connection here. And we're going to be gentle. That's a 5.8 antenna. Underneath that felt tab, there is an IPEX connector. It's always best to pry it towards the base where the connector meets the cable. That's your 5.8. Then we're going to undo this connector here. Alright, now you're going to want to undo the screws that are around the perimeter. And you have a couple more in the front here. All right, now under this black, what looks like electrical tape, you're going to peel that up, and it's going to reveal a ribbon cable here. You're going to want to pry up the retainer clip, and then you can pull that ribbon cable out gently. All right, save that tape because you don't want to put it back when we reinstall everything. Now you can also pry up the tape that is holding the ribbon cable to the housing. All right, once you get the tape off, remove your top two buttons here. They just slide out, throw them in your bin. Now you're going to remove these two screws that are holding in this top board. All right, now you're going to remove the board. Somewhat similar to the Mavic. Two screws. And then remove the whole battery assembly. Set it aside. All right, now that we got the battery assembly pulled off, you're going to want to pry up on these two IPEX connectors. I find it's always best to do it to where the cable meets the connector and you pry straight up. You want to be very careful here not to pull off the connector from the board. Your needle nose pliers, and if you do this carefully and correctly, you can save the factory antennas. You're going to want to depress this retaining clip. At the same time, you're going to try to pull out the antenna. Sometimes it helps if you get a little twist too, but just like that. All right, now you're going to want to prepare your mod kit. Remove the nut and the locking washer. You can discard the locking washer if you won't be needing that. You're going to take your QMA adapters. They encapsulate the cable, the head of the cable. Kind of sandwich it. And then you just put your nut on. You can just hand tighten this nut because we're going to be removing it again once we put the bracket on. And then the same for the other side. Now you fish your cables through the factory antenna holes. There's a notch that you see. You want to line that notch up with the notch that's in the factory antenna hole. Alright, now you're going to want to hook your cables back up to the IPEX connections. Again, be very careful with these connections. Alright, now we're going to start reassembling. First, just take your battery assembly. You're just lining up the screw bosses to where they go. Now replace the 4 screws around the battery assembly. We're going to reconnect both of the connectors that we did. The first one being the battery connector, and then the 5.8. You're going to reinstall the keyboard. Now you can put back your 2 buttons from the top. Alright, then you can secure the keyboard with the 6 screws. To reinstall your 5.8 cable. reinstall your ribbon cable. Push in up to the white line and then push down on your retaining clip until it's flush with the top of the connector. Now you can reinstall the tape. Right now you're going to take the top shell, you're going to put it back in its place. Alright, now we have to reinstall the 2 ribbon cables that we loosened up or removed before we pried the shell apart. Once you get your top shell back on, just make sure all your buttons are clicking and they feel like they did before. Now you can reinstall your 2 ribbon cables on the bottom. This is where some tweezers will come in handy. See how you get that seated back in? And you just push down on that black retaining clip until it's flush with the connector. There you go. Same on the other side. Now you're going to reinstall your 2 Phillips screws. This is what holds your controller together, the 2 halves. You can reinstall the bottom shell. And put your little covers back on. And then replace your 2 T6 Torx screws. Alright, now you're going to install our T-lock bracket. Just remove the nuts. The bracket fits over the top of the QMA connections, and you just secure the nuts That's what keeps the bracket in place. And there you have it. All right, now that you modified the controller, you can basically hook up any of our antenna systems, probably except for the Conquer. I wouldn't recommend that. It's a little bit too big, but you have a whip antennas there. And those are dual band whip antennas. Or you can, while we're on the subject, let me show you the best way to remove these. You're going to want to hold around the bracket, and then you're going to pull back on the retaining clip and then pull off. These do loosen up a little bit over time, so they become a little bit easier to pull off, but the first time they may be a little bit snug. So make sure you secure around the bracket, so you don't go pulling anything out. Now if you want to hook up our control antenna system or our cyclone, snap on your 2 short cables first, twist on our antenna, and then just snap the bottom in. This one right here, you see how it has a red center? This is actually our Control 5.8 antenna, which we are about to launch. But if you have the Control 2.4, it looks identical. It just has a black center instead of a red center. And then it'll be the same thing for our Cyclone. We have a 2.4 Cyclone and a 5.8 Cyclone. All right, and this has been our instructional video on how to modify your Spark remote to work with our various antenna systems, including our ground stations, by the way. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can hit us up on our website through chat, give us a call. We're here to answer any questions you might have.